Unreal Engine 5 is set to be one of the key technologies for the current generation of gaming, exemplified most recently by the release of the latest version of Fortnite. What sets UE5 apart are three key features that define the new engine: microgeometry with Nanite, ray tracing based global illumination with Lumen, and finally virtual shadow maps. Here you're seeing it running exceptionally nicely on Xbox Series S. And now you're seeing all of those key features running on Valve's Steam Deck. Yes, even the ray tracing. A 15-watt processor, a mere peak 1.6 teraflops of GPU compute, a downclocked CPU with just half the cores of the current generation consoles. It's kind of miraculous. There are compromises, of course, but to be honest, I'm just thankful it works at all. And yeah, thanks to an assist from a member of our supporter program, I initially started this test by getting the Matrix Awakens City sample demo running on the deck, but let's just say that performance wasn't great. We're looking at really pared back visuals here, and performance-wise we're mostly in sub 20 FPS territory, but Fortnite works. And this is important because if UE5 is to define the generation to come, getting it running well on the Steam Deck is going to be crucial to the long-term prospects of the machine. Actually getting the game running is challenging though. The biggest problem of all is that owing to lack of compatibility with Fortnite's anti-cheat technology, the game doesn't run at all under SteamOS, meaning that you need to install Windows to get it operational. Second problem, well, booting the game. Epic tells us that the GPU driver for Windows is out of date and performing in a suboptimal manner. You can skip past it, but well, fundamentally this isn't really going to help, is it? But the biggest potential issue is this. So here are the settings I've chosen. They're kind of best guesses as to what Series S is doing, and we're obviously using a much lower resolution. The idea here though is to do what we did with Metro Exodus. Target the Xbox Series S feature set, but aim for 30 FPS at a lower pixel count. To be clear here, this isn't about producing optimized settings for Fortnite on Steam Deck. Using ray-traced lighting and Nanite is just not a good idea for decent performance. And yeah, if it worked under SteamOS, you'd be using the streamlined modes and you'd be looking to target 60 frames per second. This experiment, this video, is all about testing the viability of Unreal Engine 5's cutting-edge features on Steam Deck, nothing more. And yeah, initial results were good. Performance was actually really impressive, too impressive if you ask me, and something was clearly up, it just didn't look right. And if we stack up the output against Xbox Series S in multiplayer spectate mode, everything becomes clear. While the outdoor scenes look reasonably close in many areas, and it does look as though we have Nanite's geometry active, well, scenes like this are saying to me that even though the settings say we have software Lumen active, software ray tracing, we aren't actually getting ray trace lighting. There's clearly a bug here. And if we go back to the comparisons where the lighting is the same, well, yes, we did manage to achieve this by using hardware accelerated ray tracing, hardware Lumen. So yeah, remarkably, we are using the hardware accelerated ray tracing functions of the Steam Deck's APU to get a similar lighting solution. So on the one hand, this is quite cool, right? With hardware RT active, we're actually using a PC exclusive feature of Unreal Engine 5.1. Xbox Series S and in fact all of the current gen consoles use a software RT solution in Fortnite. But there's a good chunk of bad news here too. Software RT is one of the key optimizations made in getting Unreal Engine 5 running at 60 frames per second on the consoles. And for whatever reason, and I do think it's a bug here, software Lumen isn't working on Steam Deck, meaning that we need to tax the GPU much harder than we should be in order to get a broadly equivalent look to the console version, which is using software RT. So good news and bad news there. We can get close to 30 frames per second on deck, even using hardware RT, but the bad news, I guess, is that we need to use temporal super resolution in performance mode to do it, meaning that, astonishingly perhaps, we're actually upscaling from 360p in this footage. TSR really is very impressive on the one hand, but on the other hand, I can't help but think that maybe we could get better image quality and more stable performance if we did have the ability to use the same software ray tracing solution like the consoles. In fact, let's take a closer look at performance now. Using replays, we can test out a range of settings to see what's what, but this is the core settings setup I'm using. You'll see that I'm using screen space reflections like Xbox Series S, but otherwise I'm targeting high settings, which is what I suspect the consoles are doing too. Nanite active, virtual shadows on, and looking at the performance differentials here, the TSR variants are perhaps closer than you might expect, while native 720p using TAA is obviously a lot slower, but on the flip side, it's rendering ray tracing at pixel counts broadly in line with Xbox Series S. That being the case, 19 to 24 FPS is quite impressive for a handheld with a 15-watt APU, which services both CPU and GPU. Also impressive is how well TSR holds up, bearing in mind that in the performance mode here, we suspect it's scaling from like 360p. May simply be down to the way Fortnite presents, but even this looks fine on a handheld screen. TSR is really impressive. Even so, a consistent reading of 30 FPS or higher is still elusive even on the lowest resolution we have here. VSync is off in this analysis, frame rate is unlocked, so let's talk performance differentials. TSR in its performance mode across the clip weighs in at 30.04 FPS, but remember that frame rate is both above and below that average. Moving up to TSR balanced sees performance drop by 8% for a 27.6 FPS average, while the much cleaner TSR quality mode can only muster 87% of the performance mode's numbers, with a 26.2 FPS average. Native resolution 720p, TSR is turned off completely here, we're using TAA instead, and we're getting 22 frames per second on average, or 73% of TSR performance throughput. So is there any way to keep performance north of 30 FPS? Well, as I said, I wish software Lumen wasn't bugged, that it was an option, because I suspect that would probably do the job. But I did try something else, disabling virtual shadows. Across a long clip, performance increased by 5%, but in the moment comparisons can see anything up to a 10 to 12% uplift. The problem is that, as you can see in the video here, virtual shadows are crucial to the game's visual makeup. You may think you're actually seeing two different times of day here. In fact, the visual difference can be so stark, but that's not the case. You're just missing the shade provided by virtual shadows, and in my opinion, I think the game looks a lot poorer for it. One thing this does point out though is that all of the Unreal Engine 5.1 features like Lumen, Nanite and virtual shadows aren't required to be active all simultaneously, all at the same time. If we go back to my failed attempts to run Lumen under software mode, yes, we miss the beautiful ray tracing for the lighting, but we are still getting Nanite geometry, and as you can see, the performance level is enormously improved. It's actually 60% faster. Going back to using all of the high-end Unreal Engine 5 features enabled, there's something else I tried too, which was to limit performance to 30 FPS and to engage VSync, which is essentially what the Switch version does, with its own more limited feature set. Setting a performance cap also allows you to select dynamic resolution scaling, so you set TSR to your lowest resolution target, in this case performance mode at 50%, then if there's GPU headroom available, the engine pushes up the pixel count. And you're seeing VSync on versus VSync off testing here, and well, didn't quite go to plan. VSync on seems to run at a lower performance level overall, by quite some margin in some areas, and actually seems to introduce stutter that isn't there when VSync is disabled. Okay, so this has been an interesting experiment, and even hamstrung by not being able to use the more optimal RT solution as employed on the consoles, we're clearly able to run all of the Unreal Engine 5 features on Steam Deck. The caveat being that this is based on a Fortnite game that's running at 60 frames per second on the current gen consoles, and we're settling for 30 here. And we're really heavily leaning into TSR, which looks okay in this title, especially on a handheld screen, but maybe not on other potential UE5 titles. But still, It looks like you can indeed run UE5 games on deck then, but remember that some may not be targeting 60 frames per second on PS5 and Xbox Series machines. In fact, the performance requirements for every game are very different, no matter what their core technology, so there's no real guarantees at all. But at least with our first working example of an actual Unreal Engine 5 game, the deck's mere 1.6 teraflops of peak compute does seem to at least be able to run the game in a playable state, and that's pretty promising, I'd say. So yeah, this has been an interesting experiment and I enjoyed all of this testing, and I can't wait to see what the actual next Unreal Engine 5 title is, preferably one that can indeed run under Steam OS. But that's all from me for now, so yeah, like, subscribe, share and all of that stuff. Bell ringing, of course, for those notionally instant notifications, and please do consider the DF Supporter Program. High quality video downloads, an active positive community, bonus materials, early access, it's brilliant. But that's all from me for now. Thanks for watching and supporting Digital Foundry.